cabin had been in my family for years, sitting deep in the woods near the Manistee River, far from any town or major road. My grandfather and his brother made a man-made road to get to it, so it was pretty hidden. It wasn't fancy, just a small wooden structure built decades ago by my grandfather, meant for hunting trips and weekend getaways. I hadn't been there since I was a kid, but when my uncle passed away, I inherited it. I didn't plan on keeping it, but before putting it on the market, I figured I'd spend a weekend there, cleaning it up and seeing if there was anything valuable left behind. It was mid-October when I arrived. The trees were shedding their leaves in burnt orange and deep crimson, and the air was crisp with the promise of an early winter. I parked my truck near the clearing and took in the sight of the cabin, old but sturdy, still holding its own against time. The first day was uneventful. I spent most of it inside, clearing out old furniture and boxes of junk my uncle had hoarded. By the time the sun started setting, I had a small fire going in the wood stove and was sitting in an old rocking chair, sipping whiskey and flipping through a faded hunting journal I'd found in a drawer. Out of nowhere, that's when I heard it. A low, vibrating growl. I mean, not a regular growl, like a dog or wolf, but something different, something you can feel penetrate through your chest. I froze in my chair, keeping it from rocking back and forth. It wasn't the sound of a coyote or a wolf. I knew those noises pretty well growing up. This was deeper, more resonant, almost human-like, but not quite. I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the window, shining the beam into the tree line. Nothing. The woods were still, eerily silent, too silent for my likings. The usual chirping of crickets and rustling of small animals was non-existent. I shined my flashlight back and forth slowly, left and right, until I noticed them. Eyes. Two large, amber-colored eyes reflecting the beam of my flashlight, standing at the edge of the tree line. They were higher than any animals should have been, at least 7 feet off the ground. The eyes would lower to about 3 feet, then back up high again, rotating back and forth. A shape moved just beyond the trees, shifting slightly, but I couldn't make out the full form. My heart pounded and my senses heightened as I slowly stepped away from the window. The only instinct in that moment was to reach for my uncle's rifle mounted above the fireplace. I walked over to the small cabinet near the kitchen area to grab some .45-70 bullets out the box. Now, the moment my fingers started loading rounds into the rifle, a long, piercing howl echoed through the night. I stood there still, frozen in place for what felt like an eternity, gripping the rifle tightly. I slowly hunched over and crept by the window, being sure not to reveal myself. I looked over to the tree line, and the eyes had vanished. The fire in the stove crackled softly, the only sound breaking the silence. But then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, circling the outside perimeter of the cabin. I just held my breath, listening. The steps would stop, then resume on the opposite side of the cabin. Really creepy shit when you're out in the middle of the deep woods. I moved toward the door as quietly as possible, checking the old wooden lock. It wasn't much, just a flimsy bolt that could be broken with enough force. A thud against the wall made me jump. Then another, this time near the window. It was pressing against the cabin, running what sounded like to be claws along the wood. I aimed the rifle toward the door, and my hands were shaking, probably the most scared I'd been my entire life. Then, all at once, it just stopped. The footsteps, the scratching, gone. In those type of situations, the silence is worse. Minutes passed, I don't know how many. I forced myself to move, peering out the window once more. The trees swayed in the breeze, but there was nothing there. I thought maybe it was gone. But just as those thoughts came, they left. A disturbing snarl noise came from directly above me. It was on the roof of the cabin. I reacted without thinking. I sprinted to the door, unlocked it, and burst outside. I needed to get the hell to my truck. I barely made it 3 steps before I heard the impact. This thing leapt from the roof, landing behind me with a pretty loud thud. This thing was huge. I turned, finally seeing it in the dim exterior porch light. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall. It had patches of fur around its body, but wasn't fully covered. Its skin was like this dark, smoky gray color. Lean, athletic build, like one of those cage fighters. The most disturbing and terrifying thing that I've ever seen in my life. Its head was unmistakably canine and gigantic. It was like a wolf, but more grotesque. It had a long snout and jagged teeth. Its arms were too long, ending in what looked to be clawed hands. Just as I heard it getting close, I stopped and looked back, raised the rifle, and blindly fired at it. The bullet hit its chest, and it let out a furious snarl, but it didn't drop. It staggered back a few feet. I fired again, hitting its thigh area. Now, I'm no gun expert or gun enthusiast. I'm not a terrible shot, and I don't shoot guns on the regular. But a .45-70 will shred chunks out of anything on this earth. And this thing took it like it was a graze. After I did that, it lunged in the air at me, faster than anything that size should have been. I threw myself to the ground as its claws slashed through the air, missing me by inches. I scrambled to my feet, zigzagging for the truck. Dead leaves crunched beneath my boots as I fumbled with my keys. I could hear it behind me, gaining ground. Just as I reached the driver's side door, I felt a sharp pain slice across my back. It had swiped me, claws raking through my sweater and into my skin. I dropped the rifle, but the adrenaline kept me moving. I wrenched the door open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. The beast hit the truck with full force, rocking it on its suspension. Its claws screeched against the metal as it tried to rip the door off. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I didn't waste a second. I floored it, tires kicking up dirt as I sped down the narrow trail leading back to the main road. In the rearview mirror, I saw it, standing up straight, just watching me go. I didn't stop driving until I hit the nearest town. The next day, I hired a real estate agent and put the cabin on the market. I never went back. It was supposed to be a quick drive, just a shortcut through the back roads of Wexford County to avoid highway traffic on my way home from work. I drove these roads before, but never this late at night. The forest pressed close to the narrow 2-lane road. The branches arched over my car. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the dense trees on either side. There were no streetlights, no houses, just endless darkness beyond the reach of my high beams. I was about 20 minutes in when I saw something dart across the road. It moved too fast for me to get a clear look, so I slammed on the brakes instinctively. My tires skidded on the gravel shoulder, and my heart pounded as I scanned the road ahead. Nothing. The forest was dead silent, unnervingly so. Just the soft ticking of my engine as it idled. I don't know, but something told me to glance up, and about 30 feet in front of me, something stepped out from the trees into my beams. It was unnaturally tall, 9 feet, maybe more, covered in red fur. Its form was vaguely human but wrong in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. Its legs were bent like the back of a dog's. Its thighs were massive, its arms nearly reaching its knees, ending in hands tipped with claws that looked sharp enough to carve through steel. It looked like some giant, mutated fox on steroids. And its head, it looked similar to a fox's head, just 5 times bigger with pointed ears and a snout filled with teeth that seemed too large for its mouth. Its jaws were closed, but its teeth were overlapping. It walked upright, slowly, deliberately, stepping onto the asphalt like it had every right to be there. It was honestly hard for me to breathe at that moment. It's like no one's mind is ever trained or programmed to witness something like this. We hear monsters aren't real, and people just make shit up about Bigfoot and other cryptids. I know now there's truth behind all of it. Hell, before this, I was atheist, but now I'm more open to hearing people's view on their beliefs. Anything's possible, right? I gripped the wheel, trying to convince myself I was seeing things. Some kind of bear, a trick of the light, anything but the truth that was standing right in front of me. Then it lowered itself onto all fours, muscles tensing. It looked pissed off and like it was preparing to pounce. I didn't think, I just acted. My foot slammed on the gas, and my truck lurched forward. The thing didn't hesitate. It exploded into motion, its claws scraping the gravel as it sprinted alongside me. I was doing 50, then 60, pushing the truck as fast as I could, but it kept up effortlessly. It was right next to me, its eyes locked on mine through the driver's side window. It could have killed me then and there. It could have bumped my vehicle off into the ditch and snatched me out of there. This thing was literally the size of my vehicle, if not bigger. It was toying with me. I swerved violently, trying to shake it, but it didn't falter. Its limbs moved in an unnatural blur, covering ground faster than anything should be able to. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, it veered off into the woods. Gone. I kept driving. I didn't slow down, didn't look back. I just kept going until I reached the first sign of civilization, a gas station on the outskirts of town. I pulled in, my hands shaking as I killed the engine. My entire manhood was shaken up, the adrenaline crash hitting me all at once. For a long time, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at my own pale reflection in the rearview mirror. Then I noticed the scratches, deep gouges along the side of my truck, from the front door to the rear fender. 4 long parallel marks. I never took that road again. I've hunted in the Upper Peninsula my whole life. My dad taught me how to track deer when I was just a kid, and by the time I was a teenager, I could field dress a buck in the dark. The woods around Tahquamenon Falls were my second home, deep, dense, and far from civilization. That's why I wasn't afraid when I decided to do a solo hunting trip during the first week of November. I packed light, just my rifle, some food, box of ammo, and a tent. No cell service out there, but I had a radio and plenty of experience. I set up camp about 5 miles from the nearest road, far enough that I wouldn't see another soul for days. The first day was quiet. I didn't see a single deer, no tracks, no movement, nothing. It was odd for this time of year, but I figured I just had bad luck. The second day, I found tracks, but they weren't deer. They were gigantic, deep, clawed prints in the mud near a creek bed, almost like a bear's, but not quite. The stride was too long, the shape too narrow. I followed them for a bit, curiosity getting the better of me. They led deeper into the woods, twisting in a way that didn't feel natural. Then they just stopped. No signs of turning around, no fading into the underbrush. One step was there, the next was nothing but undisturbed leaves. I don't know. Something felt off. Something felt wrong. I decided to turn back toward my camp, keeping a watchful eye for any more tracks along the ground. That's when I heard something. A deep, powerful breathing sounded like this thing had the lung capacity of a horse. It was super close. I quickly spun around, raising my rifle, but there was nothing there. The trees stood still, the wind barely moving through the branches, but I could definitely feel something in the air, like something was watching me. I forced myself to keep moving, walking at a steady pace. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I knew better. Predators chase what runs. The deep, heavy breathing followed me, never getting closer, never falling too far behind. When I reached my camp, the fire had burned low. I threw more wood on, watching the flames flare to life. Fire meant safety, or at least it should have. The woods around me remained unnervingly silent. No crickets, no owls, just the crackling of the flames and my own pounding heart. I laid sideways in my tent with my rifle aimed at the entrance, because I was already on alert from the heavy breathing earlier, forcing myself to stay awake. At some point, exhaustion won. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up to the sound of something heavy brushing against my tent. I shot up, gripping my rifle and slowly unzipping the tent to peek outside. The fire had dimmed again, leaving only embers glowing in the dark. And that's when I saw it, 20 feet beyond the dimming fire. A figure, tall and broad, standing on two legs. Its silhouette was enormous, easily over 6 feet. The faint light from the embers caught its eyes, large, amber-colored, glowing like a predator's in the night. It was just standing there like a statue watching me. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, it lowered itself onto all fours to the ground. It took a slow step forward, like a lion does when it's stalking antelope in the tall grass. There was no way I was waiting to see what it was going to do next. I grabbed my pack, slung my rifle over my shoulder, and I bolted out of there. The forest was pitch black, but I didn't care. I've never seen anything natural like that with glowing eyes. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared as hell. It's not like the movies when you see something like that, and you have the balls to confront it with hot lead. I crashed through the underbrush, snapping branches. I was breathing heavy. I wasn't in the best shape either. Behind me, I heard it move. Branches snapping and bushes moving. It wasn't running at full speed, just keeping pace. These Dogman things are intelligent. I've heard encounters and how they mess with people out in these woods. I remember bursting into a small clearing and looking back. The moon had shifted through the clouds, casting silver light over the trees, and there it was, standing at the edge of the clearing, fully illuminated. If you ever seen the movie Dog Soldiers, this was the closest thing to it. Jet black fur clung to its powerful frame. Its chest expanded with each slow breath, muscles rippling beneath the coarse hair. It put Brock Lesnar and The Rock to shame. Just a pure killing machine. I don't know. I think the government was fucking around and experimenting with animals. Who knows what type of shit is lurking in these national parks? But that's the government, always hiding shit. This thing's head was unmistakably lupine. Long snout, sharp ears, but its eyes were wrong, too intelligent. It took another step forward, claws flexing against the dirt. I wasn't taking any chances. I raised my rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the forest, and the thing jerked back but didn't fall. It let out a sound, not a yelp, not a roar, but something deep, angry, just a horrifying sound I can't explain. I chambered another round, but before I could fire, it disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. No movement, no sound. I stood there for like 5 seconds and bolted the hell out of there. I didn't stop until I saw my truck. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped off, not caring about the rough terrain. By the time I hit pavement, the sun was rising. I never went back, and I'll never hunt alone again. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.